we're going to be working with butternut squash. It's a fantastic fall winter vegetable. So during these COVID times when we go shopping, we want to make sure that we touch as little as possible. So the first thing we're going to do is shop with our eyes. So what we're looking for is evenly colored butternut squash. So we want the flesh to all be the same color. These are all pretty good shape, except you can see this one's not. And then we're looking at ones that are pretty evenly oblong. They don't have a large bulb on the bottom. The larger the bulb, the more the cavity and the more seeds will be there. So we're looking for fairly evenly shaped ones like this. And then once we pick it up, as long as it's firm and not mushy and we don't see a lot of brown spots, we know that we picked a nice, good, firm butternut squash.
Welcome to the Chef in the Fridge kitchen. The whole concept of Chef in the Fridge was to go shop for local ingredients, seasonal ingredients, and then use every part of them. Nothing goes to waste. And while we're doing that, we make sure that we prep. We prep every ingredient for all of our recipes so that we can guarantee ourselves some culinary success while we're going through the kitchen and cooking and have a lot of fun. So today we're going to take the star ingredient, which is butternut squash. We went shopping for the squash and you saw that we picked one that was evenly colored, that was firm, there were no soft spots, and we wanted to get one that was as oblong shaped without the biggest bell possible to limit the cavity in the seeds. So today we're making 3 dishes with our butternut squash. We're going to be making butternut squash chips that'll go with a nice little dip. We're going to make a raw butternut squash ribbon salad with a citrus dressing. And then we're going to traditionally roast the butternut squash and make some butternut squash ravioli with a brown butter sage sauce. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to peel the skin, because the skin is what we're going to use to make our chips. So I'll grab a nice peeler and we're just going to go down. Now, we have to decide what shape we want. Initially, if it's going really well, like it is right now, you're going to get these long strips. We're going to ultimately cut them into chips, even though some people like to leave them as strips, and they work great for dipping as strips as well. But I'm going to use them as chips, so we're going to cut them down into chip size. You can see it's not very difficult. I do have a sharp peeler, and I could speed it up, and just because I know that I only want chips, and just go in quick motions and cut them already that way. But we're going to slowly go around and make chips. As you can see, it's easy and we're not going to waste anything. Most people don't think of eating the skin of squash. Some are softer than others. And when it comes to butternut squash, they really are difficult to soften up when you cook them whole with the squash. But us roasting them as individual chips is going to make it so that they are very crunchy and easy to eat. All right, that looks good. So we now take our knife and cut sizes, regular chips. We're going to use a roasting tray, and we're going to just cut into various shapes. The whole idea of this is that it's unique. Everyone's going to be different because every squash is shaped differently. We don't really care. So we'll get all these on here. The chips that we already cut that came off small, we don't have to deal with. Right now I have an oven that is preheating to 400 degrees. What we're going to do to soften these up a little, like I said, when it comes to butternut squash, the skin is edible but tough. We're going to roast them for about 10 minutes plain. Then we'll pull them out and we'll add our oil and our seasonings, and then we'll finish them into chips where they get nice and crispy. While those are roasting for 10 minutes, let's get started on our citrus dressing for our ribbon salad. So I have my ingredients all set right here. I'm gonna bring them over. I said, don't worry about separating everything out and all the containers and all the trays. Dishwashers or a good friend. Either one will work, and if they want to eat, they'll be more than happy to. So for the dressing, we have some apple cider vinegar. All the details of the recipe you'll be able to find on the chefinthefridge.com recipe page, so you don't have to worry about the measurements. You'll be able to print those. This is a little maple syrup. Again, maple syrup with the whole concept of the fall season and butternut squash. Add a little sweetness with some fresh maple syrup, some Dijon mustard, fresh squeezed orange juice. Definitely use fresh squeeze. There's such a difference in the flavor and also the sweetness. Some fresh squeezed lemon juice. And then we have the zest of half of a fresh orange. Okay. We'll whisk that together. And after it's all incorporated, we'll start adding our extra virgin olive oil. See, this takes a few seconds to put together. And the brightness of all that citrus, along with the nuttiness of the butternut squash. It's a delicious combination, and the acid will also start softening up the squash. Okay, let's set that aside. We'll grab our squash back. Now, with the same peeler, we want to create ribbons. This time it is important that we get nice, long pieces. Where before when we were making the chips, it didn't really matter. But this is so easy, and you can see what beautiful color. We picked the perfect squash. So I'm going to throw these right into the dressing. Part of the whole plan is, while I'm doing this, the chips are roasting for that first 10 minutes. I'm going to be done doing this. At the same time, those will be done, and I'll be able to move on to the next step. And we're just going to be moving from recipe to recipe, ingredient to ingredient, all being able to maximize our time because we set ourselves up with prep. So we have the ribbons inside of our dressing. We're going to toss them, get them evenly coated. And we're going to leave them on the counter, and we're going to let them sit out and continue to soften. And we'll toss them every few minutes, maybe every 10 minutes, for about 30 minutes. They're already starting to soften up. The smell, I wish you could smell the butternut squash. It's so fresh. Okay, so we're good. We're going to set this aside. We're going to use the seeds, we're going to roast them, and those seeds are going to go on top of our salad. They're going to be our crunchy little croutons. So we're going to cut the bottom off. Again, we're not going to waste anything. Whatever is left of the squash, we are going to cut into cubes. Now the great part about squash, it can be cut into cubes and it can be stored in an airtight container in the refrigerator, and we can use it for something else. Or we can cook it, we can roast it, and then we can freeze it and use it at a later date. So here we have the flesh, which we're gonna grab a spoon real quick. We get that flesh out. And seeds. We don't want to waste anything, so we'll get the seeds out of here as well. Okay, before we finish with the seeds, it's time for us to get the chips out of the oven and dress them. So let's grab our chips. Make a little room here. You can see that the edges have started to curl already, and that the chips are already starting to lose some of their moisture. So let's get our olive oil and our seasonings. We have some extra virgin olive oil. I hope all those seasonings stick. And then we have some garlic, granulated garlic. We have some granulated onion. and some paprika. That looks good. And we're going to add a little salt and pepper. Nice sea salt and some fresh ground black pepper. Now, if you have kitchen hands, you can toss these with your hand. And if you don't, a pair of tongs will work as well. We're going to toss these to evenly coat them. We're going to spread them out. And now they're going to go back into the oven for about 15 minutes. I say about because you can see how thin they are. So you want to make sure that you check them, because they're going to go from perfect chips to burnt chips in about a minute. So your window of success is very small. So we're going to put them in the oven and we're going to check them in about 10 to 15 minutes. While those are finishing up, we can now finish our seeds. I have our little tray here, so we're just going to put the seeds on the tray, separate them out. And you can see what an easy process this is. It's nothing complicated so far. We peeled the squash, we took the seeds out, we cut ribbons with a standard peeler. Nothing crazy here. And that's what's so great. It's all about the ingredient. Nothing has to be complicated. We're going to create a dish. Think about how we put this together. We have chips and a little dip as your little appetizer. Then we'll have the squash ravioli along with the butternut squash salad. So we've made basically a whole little meal using squash. All right, almost there. Then the seeds we're only going to season with a little salt and pepper. That's it. And then we're going to put them in the same 400-degree oven. And they should be finished right around the same time that our squash skin chips are done. And minimizing the time in the kitchen and maximizing oven usage and space. Okay, let's put these in the oven. Salt and pepper first. Can't forget that. Okay, 400-degree oven, about 10 minutes. Our butternut squash chips, fully seasoned, are in the oven finishing. Our butternut squash seeds are roasting in the oven. So now we're going to roast the butternut squash traditionally so that we can get the meat in order to make our butternut squash raviolis. So it's simple. You want to find like the flattest spot you can, so make it easy to cut. And then you're just going to cut it right down the middle. Obviously a sharp knife is helpful. Okay, finish it off. So we'll take the seeds out. If you remember when we went shopping, I said it was important for us to try to find a butternut squash that did not have a big bulb at the bottom. You can see why here. Look how small the cavity is. Look at all that flesh we have. There's very little seeds to take out. So we're definitely maximizing our butternut squash. What we're going to do is put a little olive oil, salt, pepper, and then roast them, cut side down. They're going to roast for about 35 to 40 minutes. And get nice and soft and tender and get that delicious caramelization on the bottom. So we can put these right on our tray. Again, grab our salt and pepper. Turn them over. And let's put them in the oven. And we don't want to waste any of this, so again, we would separate the seeds, just like we did before. Season them up with salt and pepper, roast them, and then we'll store them in an airtight container. And now we have them to garnish soups, salads, as well as eat them as a snack. They're great. See, our seeds are golden, nice and crispy. We get them off the tray, set them aside to use them later for our salads. Again, like I said, if you have extra seeds, like we were using 2 squash today, we would just take them, put it in an airtight container, and we can use them as a snack or use them later for a soup. So let's just set these aside. And now our squash skin chips should be done. So let's pull those out of the oven. All right. So our squash skin chips are nice and brown on the edges. They're curled up, crispy. Put them in a bowl, put them aside when we're done cooking, so we could start out with a little appetizer. We made a little dip to go with them. It's going to be some mayonnaise, some maple syrup, some lemon juice, and some paprika. And a great way for us to get ready for the star, which is the ravioli. Speaking of which, when I pulled out the chips, I was thinking that we should probably add some onion and some garlic to our butternut squash and roast the last 20 minutes. It'll add some great flavor to the squash when we mash it to put inside the potatoes. So let's pull those out. Pull out a squash. So I chopped a half an onion. So let's just drop that right in between in here. And I have 4 whole cloves of garlic. We're gonna leave them whole, don't chop them, because we don't want them to burn while this is all roasting. And then we'll just put a little bit of olive oil on them. We'll put this back in the oven. We still have another 20 minutes or so those should come out perfect. Our butternut squash is roasting for the filling for the pasta. Let's make some fresh pasta dough. Everybody wants to make pasta dough. Lots of people are afraid of making pasta dough. It is as simple as everyone says it is. The only problem we're going to have is this green shirt is going to be white when we're done. But it's worth it. So we have 2 cups of flour right on the counter. I'm going to make a well in the center, almost like a volcano. Okay. A little salt. I'm going to put 3 eggs. Right in the middle. And now 1 tablespoon of olive oil. That's all the ingredients. It's that simple. We're going to scramble the eggs a little bit in the middle, get them all incorporated with the oil, and then we'll slowly start adding some of the flour and incorporate it in. Now the eggs always try to escape. They never get very far, but when they do, if they break through the wall, you just push them back in, create your wall over again. That's all. Ultimately, we're going to be mixing it all together. But you can see I'm slowly incorporating the flour into the eggs and the oil. This whole process is going to take just 2 to 3 minutes. Then we'll pull it all together and knead it for about 5 minutes. And then we'll set our dough aside for 30 minutes to rest before we roll it out for our ravioli. And while that's all happening, we'll be able to finish our squash filling. Okay, so now here we are. We'll get it all in there. We'll use our dough scraper and then pull this all together. What I love about making pasta dough is that it looks like you made a mistake and then all of a sudden it's going to come together. Also, every time I make it, and I can make it once a week, I think of the first memory I actually have with my grandmother at her house in New York. I was 5 years old and I was at the kitchen table and she was teaching me how to make pasta dough. And that is definitely where my passion started. And I spent many, many weeks with my grandmother every summer having her teach me how to cook. And then my mom, she was instrumental in teaching me how to cook faster and for more people and more economically. So we're just gonna bring this all together. You can see it's all starting to come together. It doesn't take much. That's what's so interesting to me, because everybody who eats homemade pasta, fresh pasta, always talks about how it's so good. It doesn't taste anything like the kind you get in the store. It's amazing. And if you want to impress people, you make homemade pasta. You can see 4 ingredients, nice and simple. Now we're going to knead it together. Okay, our doughs come together. We'll form into a nice disc. You know that it's good when you press it down and it pops back up just like that. We're going to put it into an airtight bag for 30 minutes to rest. And while it's resting, our roasted butternut squash, onions, and garlic will be ready and we can make the filling. We're done with the filling. We will be able to roll out our ravioli dough and finish our meal. While the pasta dough is resting, we could go back and toss our butternut squash ribbons in that citrus dressing again to keep tenderizing them. You can see the beautiful color. And again, I wish you could smell this, the fresh orange juice, lemon juice, and the squash, the buttery, nutty flavor is amazing. We'll set those aside and we'll be able to get our roasted squash out of the oven. The squash, as you can see, is nice and soft and tender. We're going to take the flesh out. So we'll scoop that right into a bowl. You can see how nice and soft it's caramelized. Oh yeah. How perfect is that? We scooped out all the flesh. Now we're going to take our roasted garlic cloves and all of those roasted onions and put them inside the filling as well. Excellent. Great. We'll move this out of the way. We can finish our filling. We have a little bit of brown sugar, a little bit of Parmesan cheese, and then we're going to add some salt and pepper. I like a lot of pepper. I find a lot of people do, but of course you could season it to taste. So just mix that all together. You can smell the fresh ground pepper mixing with the squash. The roasted garlic is breaking up. And the onions are all mixed. So we can set this filling aside, cool off a little bit, and roll out our ravioli dough. But before we do that, let's mix our butternut squash ribbon salad again. I can feel it getting tender with the tongs. When we're finished, we'll add some salt and pepper and top it with our roasted butternut squash seeds. All right, let's roll out some pasta dough. I cut our rested ravioli dough into 4 strips. Put a little flour down. Now, some people will use a pasta machine. But we're going to go the old-fashioned way and just roll it out. So we get into a nice, about a foot long strip. Turn it a little bit more. You can see it's nice and pliable. So the goal here is to get it to be probably about 16 inches long and about 3 or 4 inches wide, so we can use it as the base for our ravioli. So it's a lot of fun rolling ravioli, but people go pay to work out. Well, you don't have to do that. Again, like I said, if you prefer to use a machine, you could use a machine. We're going to try to roll it so that it's nice and thin. We don't want our pasta to be too thick. While we're doing this, again, keeping in mind prep, the water, salted water, is boiling, so it's ready as soon as the raviolis are done for us to drop them in. And while they're cooking, we'll be able to make our sauce. The brown butter sage sauce takes maybe 5 minutes start to finish, so there's no reason to make it ahead, although you could. Again, the whole concept here is just about everything we've made today you can make ahead, including the pasta dough. It could be made a day ahead of time, wrapped in plastic, kept in the fridge. Just bring it up to room temperature before you try to roll it out. The filling can be made ahead of time. All right, we're almost there. The last couple of rolls. One more turn. Nice and thin. So you want to get it so that you can almost see through it. There we go. Now we're ready to start our filling. So we're going to take a tablespoon of filling and put them about 1 inch apart. Again, you get to decide how big the raviolis are going to be. Do you want to make mini raviolis or larger ones? There we go. So we'll take one of our sheets that we pre-stretched, put it over the top. Okay. Now you want to go right around the filling, get the air pockets out. The great part about the fresh pasta dough is that there's going to be a lot of scraps here, and you can just take the scraps and re-roll them, make more ravioli because it's so fresh. Okay, so now we can shape them. We're going to get a nice straight edge. Like I said, we could use those scraps to make some more. Again, square off the ends. And now go in between. And we could use a fork to get that traditional look, crimp the edges, keep our filling in. And set them aside. So I showed you the larger ravioli. Now we'll make a couple of smaller ones with the next dough. I don't have a problem with the larger size raviolis. Pasta dough is so delicious. Let's take you can see with the first one we made 4 ravioli. This one we're going to make 6. Or maybe 5. We'll go with 5. For our second sheet, you can see it's very thin. And we'll put it over the top, get rid of the air. And we'll just cut these a little bit smaller. you can see the difference in size when we put them on the plate. Great thing is that no matter how big you make them, they're going to cook in the same amount of time because it's the thickness of the pasta that determines how long it's going to take. So again, we'll re-roll the scraps and continue to make more ravioli. So let's get our brown butter sage sauce going. We have 8 tablespoons of unsalted butter. You don't want to use salt. Salt will tend to make it foam up. So while that's melting, let's put some of our ravioli into the pot. So we'll get these done at the same exact time. You don't want to overcrowd the pot. So just put in 6 minutes to get started. Our butter's melting. I'm gonna let it melt completely. Then we'll add our garlic. Add our chopped garlic. We'll let that saute up a little, 30, 60 seconds. This is one of the easiest sauces to make. We'll then add our sage. Again, another 30 seconds. And then a little salt and pepper and we're done. Raviolis floated to the top. We're gonna just touch them with our spoon here and see how they feel. They could still use a little bit more. Tender up a little bit more. So our butter is nice and bubbly. Our garlic has been sauteing for about 60 seconds. Let's add our fresh sage. The great part about living in Southern California is this sage is right from my own herb garden, which I can grow year round. So it's fresh, delicious. Oh, the smell is great. We'll let that go for about 30 seconds. We'll add a little salt and pepper and our sauce is done. And our raviolis will be ready to come out. See the butter starting to get a little bit brown, a little golden. That's going to be the nuttiness that adds to the nuttiness inside the filling of the butternut squash. Okay, add our brown pepper, a little bit of salt. Remember, we use unsalted butter, so we put the salt in now. See the color starting to turn. We can shut that off and take our raviolis out. So we'll plate our raviolis. So these large ones are the pasta lovers ravioli. And then we have regular size. Perfect. Got a little bit of our brown butter sage. And we can finish plating the rest of our dishes. We can finish up our butternut squash ribbon salad. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. It's been sitting on the counter for a little over 30 minutes. Again, tossing it every 5 to 10 minutes, soften it up. A little ground black pepper, and then a little Parmesan cheese. Let's toss these ribbons, the pepper, the salt, the cheese. And then we'll finish it up with our toasted butternut squash seeds. Got our little croutons. Give it the crunchiness and the saltiness. So, chef in the fridge. We find great fresh, seasonal ingredients. We make sure we use every part of it. As you saw, we prepped everything in advance. So when it comes time to cook, you have culinary success every time because you could focus in on the dishes and enjoy making them, enjoy being with your family and friends while you do it. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope you come back and watch our future episodes where we'll show you how to take every ingredient, create a dish, so you always have a chef in the fridge.